And welcome back to News On. Joining us once again, our bipartisan panel, Gavin Wax and Robert Patillo. So right before the break, gentlemen, we were talking about a number of Republicans joining some of these races, anticipating that things, and you brought it up, Robert Patillo, we'll get to it, but cancel culture being one of them, gas prices being another, cost of lumber, you name it, helping them win some of these races. Gavin, what do you think?
The midterms are looking to be a bloodbath for Democrats. If we saw in Texas 6, the Susan Wright district, the Democrats were basically locked out of the runoffs in that race, and the Republicans overperformed, I believe, 18 points compared to what Trump did in that same district just back in November. So we're going to have a lot more of these special elections coming up. If we also looked at some of the local mayoral races across the state of Texas, it also showed that a lot of the gains that Republicans have made with Hispanics, particularly working class Hispanics, are here to stay. So there's going to be many more special elections and local elections in the lead up to the midterms, including stuff in New York City and other states. So we're going to look at that. And obviously the data so far does not point well for any Democrats to hold on to their seats. And obviously you mentioned the inflation, you mentioned the economic crisis, you mentioned the fuel shortage. All of this is going to backfire on the Dems badly. Biden ran on a return to normalcy. If he cannot deliver normalcy, he's not going to be able to hold a united government, and he's going to be facing some serious losses heading into the midterms.
All right, for the viewers watching at home, you heard what Robert had to say, you heard what Gavin had to say. What do you think? You can always share your voice with us. Again, hashtag share your voice. You can find me at Real Miranda Khan. All right, I want to go to another topic now. Our news partners at Just the News caught up with Housing and Urban Development Secretary Marcia Fudge recently and asked her whether HUD is prioritizing American citizens over illegal immigrants for public housing units. According to Just the News report, she replied by saying, quote, "The answer is no. We are doing everything we can possibly do to take any person living in this nation off the streets." That's kind of our posture. I think that is exactly where we are headed. Robert, being that this is an especially difficult time for so many American families right now with the pandemic and business closures, is that the right approach?
It absolutely is. You know, I'm a Southern Baptist by birth and by being raised in South Georgia. And you often ask the question, what would Jesus do in that situation? I couldn't imagine any Christian standing up and saying, show me your papers first before I give you housing. We have to make sure we're handling the humanitarian crisis of housing in this country. We should not be living in the richest nation on earth where you have 3 separate billionaires sending spaceships into outer space and still having a homelessness problem in this country. So I think Marcia Fudge is striking the exact right tone that this is a human crisis above all else, and we need to ensure that we are protecting families and children, and paperwork can come down the line, but what we have to be doing is doing what is in the Christian value of defending the poor and taking care of the sick in their times of need.
But Robert, let me paint another scenario, if you will. Would you give your neighbor's child a bed before your own child?
If they were in more need than my child was, absolutely. You give to the sick, you give to the poor. What happens to that big sign we have on the Statue of Liberty, giving you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses, yearning to be free. So if I'm sleeping somewhere comfortably and we have space for more people in this country, then by all means we should be taking care of the sick and the downtrodden and exercising what we.
But that isn't the question, because a lot of people will say, why aren't we helping some of the people that are in this country right now, people that are struggling, instead of trying to help our neighbors? Not that we shouldn't help our neighbors, but you know as well as everyone watching this show, we have entire homeless tent communities. We have them here in Florida. We have them here in California. They're all over the place. A lot of them veterans.
You're completely correct, and I think we have to take homelessness and housing insecurity seriously as a nation. Remember, there aren't homeless people in this country because we don't have enough houses. There are homeless people in this country because we make the policy decisions that we choose to allow them to be so. We have to take that seriously as a country and understand that it is our responsibility. So when you see the Biden administration doing things such as stimulus checks, as housing vouchers, unemployment benefits that the Republican governors are trying to take away, they're trying to address just that form of insecurity, and we need to be handling these humanitarian crisis and understand that $1.5 trillion can't go to tax cuts, and then we get mad when we're trying to give poor children somewhere to sleep at night.
Gavin, so I'm going to ask you the same question. There is a shortage of available housing units. So should they be given to citizens first? If you ask Robert
Absolutely.
Patillo, not necessarily.
Well, no, absolutely. We should always prioritize American citizens first. They've been paying into this system their whole lives, maybe in blood as well in the case of veterans. They should be our first priority as a state. And if we do have extra resources, then that could be discussed. But we're in this situation now because as a society, as a nation, we're constantly working towards helping other countries, foreign nationals, and we're not helping our own. We do have a massive homeless crisis in this country. And you look at the most liberal of cities and states, such as New York, such as California. New York implemented this policy already, giving preference or giving no preference to citizens and equally giving out NYCHA housing units to illegals. And we still have a massive homeless crisis. It isn't solving any issues. It's exacerbating the problem because we're creating an incentive for people now to come here illegally to take advantage of these opportunities. We're creating a path for them to get now a house on the public dime. So of course we're going to just bring more people in. We're going to have more homeless on the street, and it's going to be a cyclical, it's going to be a downward spiral until we get this under control. So we have to realize that our priority should always be to our citizens first and foremost. And obviously, being the country that we are, being the rich, wealthy country that we are, as Robert mentioned, we obviously do give a lot to charity.
Yeah.
We're still one of the most charitable societies on the planet, and we can continue to do so while still prioritizing our own citizens.
All right, I want to go to something that, Robert, you brought up right before the break, this whole idea of cancel culture. So in other news, Just the News, John Solomon interviewing prominent civil rights icon Bob Woodson just recently. He had some pretty harsh words for the left's handling of race issues. He even went as far as accusing them of weaponizing race. Take a quick listen.
The left has weaponized race. When George Floyd died, there were so-called peaceful demonstrations to pursue justice for blacks.
Right.
But in the process of doing that, they appropriated the rich tradition of the civil rights movement and began to migrate it from seeking justice for blacks to burning books, Bibles in Portland, burning the American flag. So there was really an appropriation of the civil rights movement and misapplying it to using it as a bludgeon to decimate our civic institutions and our values.
We're tight on time, but Robert, I'm going to give 30 seconds to you to respond and then the same to you, Gavin. Go ahead.
That's the exact same argument that was used against the March on Washington in 1964, the same argument that was used in 1968, the same argument used in Watts. You can go a century before that to social activism after Reconstruction in America. You always accuse people of weaponizing race. We never accused the system of using race as a means to hold down and oppress certain groups in this country, and that's what has to change.
Gavin.
BLM is using the vestiges of the civil rights movement and their legacy as a means to propel their own violent rhetoric, their own divisive rhetoric. It's disgusting. They're using this cloak of civil rights, of justice, of equality, all these things that everyone can get behind in order to promote their own form of racism, their own form of bigotry. And it's disgusting, and I commend anyone who calls that out.
All right, again, you heard what our panel thinks. What do you think? You can always share your voice with us. Hashtag share your voice. Find me at Real Miranda Khan. Gavin, Robert, as always, thank you both for joining us here on News On. Pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Miranda.
Enjoy the rest of your week. All right, stick around. There's still a lot more to come in this edition of News On. Poor Louisiana and a town that I worked and lived in, Lake Charles. Wow, can't seem to catch a break. Extreme weather continuing to wreak havoc there, actually turning roads into rivers. You almost have to just see it to believe it. Could they catch a break here soon? We're going to get an update with Weather Nation. Also, Joe Greenberg. You may recall we mentioned it the other day. Basically, he was facing 33 federal charges. He did plead guilty to 6 of those. His lawyer spoke out. Again, this was a former close associate of Representative Matt Gaetz here in Florida. What he seemed to suggest, we'll have to just show it to you. That's coming up right after the break. You're watching News On. We'll be right back.